Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the legislation currently under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
And, Madam Speaker, I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Today the House considers H.R. 1258, the Truth in Caller ID Act. This measure was introduced by our colleagues, Mr. Engel, and by Mr. Barton, the ranking member of our Committee on Energy and Commerce. It would direct the Federal Communications Commission to prohibit caller ID spoofing, through which a caller falsifies the original caller ID information during the transmission of a call with the intent to defraud or to deceive. Typically, caller ID spoofing involves a caller changing the number that would show on the call recipient's caller ID when that call is received. Spoofing has been possible for a number of years, but it has generally required very expensive equipment in order to change the outgoing call information. But with the growth of voice over IP telephoning, spoofing has become easier and it's become less expensive, and the number of websites now are offering spoofing services, and so its prevalence, unfortunately, is growing. And that growth in the volume of spoofing makes necessary the legislation under consideration presently. The proliferation of spoofing technologies and services means that those who want to deceive others by manipulating caller ID can now do so with relative ease. Spoofing threatens a number of existing business applications, including credit card verification and automatic call routing, because these systems rely on the telephone number as identified by the caller ID system as one piece of verification and authentication information. At other times, however, spoofing may be used to protect individuals. I would note an example of domestic violence shelters that sometimes use spoofing to mask the identity of the caller in order to protect that caller's safety. By prohibiting the use of caller ID spoofing only where the intent is to defraud or deceive, this measure will address nefarious uses of the technology while continuing to allow those legitimate uses. In the domestic violence shelter situation, there is no intent to cause harm, which is an element of the crime of deception. Therefore, using caller ID spoofing to protect the location of a victim of domestic violence is not deceptive and would be allowed under the provisions of the bill now under consideration. This measure on previous occasions, in fact in the 2 previous Congresses, has been approved in the House on the suspension calendar, and a similar measure in this conference has been approved by the Senate. I look forward to advancing this legislation today, and I want to say thank you to Mr. Engel, to Mr. Barton, to my colleague and friend on the Commerce Committee, Mr. Stearns, and other members of our committee who on a bipartisan basis have contributed to the construction of this measure and advancing it to the floor today. I urge approval of the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida.